All right, Broncos country. So let's go ahead and talk about how this loss to the Detroit Lions affects the Denver Broncos' playoff chances. After the results of all three of today's games, including the Lions game, the Broncos' playoff odds have now shot all the way down to 33%. But the silver lining here is if the Broncos win their next three games, their playoff chances are in the high 80s to the low 90s. So that's pretty damn good odds of getting in. This loss isn't the death sentence for the Denver Broncos, but they do certainly need some help moving forward in order to boost their chances. Them winning just those games, that will boost their chances up to the high 90s, but there's still some outcomes out there that could happen that hurt the Broncos. In terms of a rooting guide for the remainder of the games this week, we need the Chicago Bears to beat the Cleveland Browns. You need the New York Jets to somehow beat the Miami Dolphins. We need the Titans to beat the Texans in a game where the Texans are starting Case Keenum at quarterback. We need the Cowboys desperately to go into Buffalo, take care of business, and beat the Bills. We need the Ravens to beat the Jaguars. We need the Patriots to beat the Chiefs. That is what keeps our slim hopes of maybe winning the division alive, but I don't see that happening. And then that's basically it. All the other ones don't have AFC opponents. So that's basically the rooting guide for the Denver Broncos as we move into next week. Need the Bears to beat the Browns, Titans to beat the Texans, Jets to beat the Dolphins, Patriots to beat the Chiefs, Cowboys to beat the Bills, and then Ravens to beat the Jaguars. That will really help out the Broncos' playoff positioning. If the Broncos were to win next week against New England, that will shoot their playoff chances back up to 53%, roughly. It stopped at 52. Now, let's go ahead and change this to some more realistic scenarios here because let's just be honest, I don't see the Bears beating the Browns. Titans, I can see beating the Texans without CJ Stroud, so that could be some good news. Don't see the Jets beating the Dolphins, unfortunately. Cowboys, I feel pretty confident about actually going into Buffalo and getting a win. And then Ravens over Jaguars. So, realistically, if the Broncos were to win next week, that's going to put our playoff chances at about 51%. Then after that, you need the Chargers to take care of business over the Bills, which is not ideal. You need the Seahawks to beat the Titans, which is very doable. Browns to beat the Texans. Buccaneers to beat the Jaguars. And so basically, the Broncos' best chance to make the playoffs is by winning out. If you don't win out, then you're basically not going to make it, as you can see here. Like, that was the one game that the Broncos could afford to give was this Lions game, and they did give it. So now you have to be perfect moving forward if you are the Denver Broncos and you're going to make the playoffs. Sixth Messenger says the Broncos don't deserve to be in the playoffs at this point. We should have been able to beat the Lions. Yeah, they should have at least had a better showing today, that's for sure. But again, if the Broncos win out on their next three games, they're most likely going to get in. I would think we want the Dolphins to beat the Jets. We don't want the Bills to win that division. I mean, that's fair. This is what the simulation engine said. Let's come over here now to the ESPN playoff machine. So currently, as it stands with the updated standings, the Indianapolis Colts hold the 7th seed, the Cincinnati Bengals hold the 6th seed, the Cleveland Browns hold the 5th seed, and then the Denver Broncos on the outside looking in. Let's see, where did the Denver Broncos drop to? So the Broncos are now currently sitting at the 11th seed following the loss today, behind Pittsburgh, behind Buffalo, behind Houston, and obviously behind Indianapolis, Cincinnati, and Cleveland. So not the ideal scenario that the Denver Broncos wanted to find themselves in. Back over here now to the playoff machine. Starting off here, obviously, I'm going to have the Cleveland Browns beating the Chicago Bears, Chiefs over the Texans. Realistically, got the Dolphins over the Jets because, come on, there's no way in hell. I got the Titans beating the Texans without CJ Stroud. Cowboys over Bills. and then Ravens over Jaguars. If all of those outcomes happened, it would still be basically the same seeding. Cleveland at 5, Cincinnati at 6, and then Indianapolis at 7. Coming over here to week 17, I'm only going to be picking the matchups that have an AFC opponent in them. So Bengals over the Steelers pretty easily. I've got the Jaguars over the Buccaneers. I've got the Bills over the Chargers. I've got the probably the Dolphins over the Cowboys. I've got the Texans over the Browns, but that's all dependent on if CJ Stroud comes back. Obviously, Broncos taking care of the business. KC over the Raiders. Seattle, Tennessee. That's going to be a tough one. Tennessee's playing some pretty good ball right now. I might have to go there. And then I think Indianapolis will probably end up beating the Falcons, and then that's the last one with the AFC. So that would, again, leave the seedings unchanged right there. Week 17, we'll go ahead and do this again. Let's see here. Probably the Browns over the Jets. Realistically, that could be a game where Aaron Rodgers comes back. Oh, did I get Washington over the Jets? This would actually be the game where Aaron Rodgers potentially returns, but if they lose against Miami, I don't see that happening. So I guess I'm going to pick the Jets there. They're probably the better team, but I don't know, man. That's kind of one that could go either way. Let's see here. Got the Ravens over the Dolphins. The game is in Baltimore. Bills over the Patriots. I think the Seahawks can beat the Steelers with Mitch Trubisky at quarterback. I got the Colts over the Raiders. Chiefs over the Bengals. Us over the Chargers. That would put us on the 7th seed right there. This Tennessee-Houston game is going to be another rematch there. And unfortunately, probably do have Houston taking care of business. I'm assuming by that point, CJ Stroud's going to get back, and then Jaguars over Panthers. So if Houston ends up losing to Tennessee, that could propel Denver into the 7th seed, facing Kansas City as the number 2 seed. So that right there could be a very realistic option. And then obviously that would pretty much depend everything on week 18. Denver over the Raiders becomes critical. Ravens over Steelers, Dolphins over Bills, Patriots over Jets, because that's always what happens. Bengals, Browns. Bengals, I'm going to say, would get that one. That would propel Denver potentially to the 6th seed, but let's see what else the other games would do. Indianapolis, Houston. I'd probably pick Houston in that one if they're playing with CJ Stroud at full strength. Jacksonville over Tennessee, and then KC over the Chargers. That would have Denver as the number 7 seed, playing KC as the number 2 seed. So I think that's the most realistic scenario right there for the Denver Broncos to make the playoffs in the AFC as the number 7 seed. Again, it's very realistic, very possible, and very doable for the Denver Broncos to still make the playoffs, but it's all predicated on this team being perfect in their final game.